This show is proudly sponsored by Nedbank Business Banking. Wouldn't you rather have a bank that puts the expert back into expertise? Search Nedbank Bigger Picture Business Banking.
So what you're seeing behind me has become the norm for many businesses, not just here in South Africa, but across the globe. Many offices remain empty as companies are forced to allow most, or in some cases, all of their employees to work remotely. This is a precaution to stop the spread of COVID-19. Is this trend likely to continue? And if so, what factors do businesses and business owners need to consider in order to remain competitive and productive in what is now the not-so-new normal? Nicol Meiburg, thanks indeed for talking to us. When you look back at the start of this pandemic in 2020, is there a distinct difference between those businesses who transitioned into remote working quickly and those who appeared to be paralyzed?
What I found is that a lot of the tech companies, anything technology related, and also the larger multinational corporations, they did transition quite easily and they didn't really skip a beat in that transition. But what I did find with a lot of the SMEs, they opted to rather apply for essential services certificate and operate business as usual, going into the office every day. And of course, there are some sectors that it just wasn't a possibility. Looking at manufacturing that represents large industry in South Africa, they couldn't really function at all. The office functionality worked partially, but operationally it wasn't really possible at all.
Many months have passed since we first went into lockdown. Surely by now, whether you're a corporate or a small business, there would be a firm checklist in place when it comes to remote working. What's on that list?
In terms of a checklist, operationally, it would be things like just anything and everything an employee needs to actually function at work. And that would be having a laptop, having a desk, having a chair, access to the relevant systems, and so on. But I think what's actually more important than that is having a firm policy in place to actually regulate how remote work is going to operate. For instance, what happens if there is load shedding? What happens if your network goes down at home? How is that regulated? Do you then go into the office? Do you get paid for the time that you aren't actually working or aren't able to work? Whose problem is that? Does it fall on the employer's end, on the employee's end? So operationally, of course, they need their equipment, but just to regulate how this thing is actually going to work, that would also be extremely important.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because when you look at some of the feedback sessions, IT staff, for example, have no problem working from home. But then you have that overburdened mum and dad who's struggling with longer working hours and just an inability to switch off. Of course, businesses have to manage that.
Yes, most definitely. And it has been difficult, especially when someone has small kids at home. I was reading an article the other day about just that. It happened in the USA somewhere where there was a baby crying in the background, and that actually led to an employee being dismissed. That, of course, in South Africa would be completely illegal, but it's something to keep in mind. What do you do? How do you manage that situation?
What's the future looking like in terms of how businesses respond?
I actually think we've got an exciting future ahead of us, because going into this lockdown world, the sudden world where everyone's working remotely and nothing is the way it used to be, it did actually open up a lot of doors and give us a lot of opportunities. So if you look at, for instance, just having a skills base, suddenly with a remote work, your skills base increased to a global skills base. There's no reason to just hire people in your immediate area anymore. You can now attract skills from wherever you find them, and they will just be working remotely.
Thanks, Nicol. Now, with the local vaccination rollout program gaining momentum, businesses and business owners need to start thinking about what the future working environment will look like. If we've learned anything, there is no one-size-fits-all solution across sectors. There is still a lot of work to do to find out a hybrid answer to a very complex problem that might stay with us for some time to come.
This show was proudly sponsored by Nedbank Business Banking. Wouldn't you rather have a bank that puts the partner back into partnership? Search Nedbank Bigger Picture Business Banking.